The Middle East has entered one of the most volatile and uncertain moments in modern history, following the reported death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, after large-scale military strikes carried out jointly by the United States and Israel. The development marks a turning point not only for Iran, but for the entire global political landscape, raising fears of escalation, economic instability, and a possible reshaping of power across the Middle East. For decades, tensions between Iran and its regional rivals have simmered beneath the surface, occasionally erupting into proxy conflicts, cyber warfare, and targeted military operations. But this moment is different. The death of a sitting supreme leader, the highest authority in Iran's political and religious system, represents an event without modern precedent in the country's post-revolution history. According to reports, coordinated airstrikes targeted military installations, missile launch sites, and command centers, and strategic infrastructure across multiple Iranian provinces. Hundreds of locations were reportedly struck within hours, making the operation one of the largest aerial campaigns seen in the region in recent decades. Initial confusion surrounded the fate of Iran's leadership, with officials denying early claims. However, state media later confirmed the death, declaring a period of national mourning and signaling the beginning of a deeply uncertain political transition. To understand why this moment matters so much, it's important to understand the role of Iran's supreme leader. Unlike many political systems where presidents or prime ministers hold executive authority, Iran's supreme leader stands above elected institutions. The position controls the armed forces, intelligence services, judiciary, and ultimate decisions on foreign policy and nuclear strategy. For more than 3 decades, Khamenei shaped Iran's identity as a regional power resistant to Western influence, guiding its alliances and long-term strategic goals. His leadership defined Iran's posture toward both the United States and Israel. Relations between Tehran and Washington have remained hostile since the late 20th century, shaped by sanctions, ideological rivalry, and disputes over nuclear development. Israel, meanwhile, has viewed Iran's expanding missile capabilities and regional partnerships as an existential threat. Over time, tensions intensified through indirect confrontations across neighboring countries, cyber operations, and covert actions attributed to both sides. The recent escalation did not happen overnight. Analysts point to months of rising pressure surrounding Iran's nuclear program, which Western officials claimed had advanced beyond previously negotiated limits. Diplomatic talks repeatedly stalled, while military rhetoric increased on all sides. Regional incidents, economic instability inside Iran, and growing protests added further strain to an already fragile situation. When the strikes occurred, they immediately triggered a chain reaction across the region. Iran responded with missile and drone attacks targeting military installations connected to U.S. forces and allied nations. Several Middle Eastern countries temporarily closed their airspace. Commercial flights were canceled, and global markets reacted with sudden volatility. The fear was clear. A localized strike could rapidly transform into a broader regional conflict involving multiple states. Political reactions around the world have been sharply divided. Supporters of the operation argue that it was a necessary step to prevent nuclear escalation and eliminate long-term security threats. Critics warn that removing a central figure in Iran's leadership risks destabilizing an already tense region and could provoke prolonged retaliation. Inside the United States itself, political leaders disagreed over the strategy, with some praising decisive action while others questioned whether the long-term consequences had been fully considered. Statements from former U.S. President Donald Trump, who publicly supported the operation, framed the strikes as a move aimed at securing peace through strength, and preventing future threats. However, international leaders across Europe and Asia urged restraint, emphasizing the need for diplomacy to prevent escalation into a wider war. Beyond politics and military strategy, the economic implications are already becoming visible. The Middle East remains one of the world's most critical energy regions, and instability immediately affects global oil markets. Energy analysts warn that disruptions to supply routes or production facilities could drive fuel prices higher worldwide, impacting everything from transportation costs to food prices. Oil-producing alliances have already discussed increasing output to stabilize markets and prevent economic shockwaves. Inside Iran, the situation is even more complex. The country now faces a rare leadership transition under crisis conditions. Normally, succession is handled through a structured religious and political process overseen by senior clerical authorities. But sudden loss during an external conflict introduces uncertainty. Questions emerge about who will succeed, how unified Iran's leadership remains, and whether internal political factions could compete for influence during the transition. Some experts believe the government may respond by consolidating power and adopting a stronger security posture to maintain stability. Others argue that economic pressures and public dissatisfaction could intensify domestic unrest, especially if conflict continues. The outcome depends heavily on how quickly a successor emerges and whether the new leadership seeks confrontation or negotiation. At the regional level, neighboring countries are watching carefully. Many fear being drawn into a broader conflict through alliances or retaliatory actions. Military bases, shipping routes, and energy infrastructure across the Gulf region remain on heightened alert. Even countries not directly involved are preparing defensive measures, highlighting how interconnected security has become across the Middle East. Another major concern involves proxy conflicts. Over the years, regional tensions have often played out indirectly through allied groups operating across multiple countries. So analysts warn that retaliation may not occur only through direct military confrontation, but through asymmetric responses, cyber operations, or attacks on strategic infrastructure. Meanwhile, global diplomacy faces one of its most difficult challenges in years. International organizations and major powers are attempting to prevent further escalation while balancing competing political interests. Calls for ceasefires and negotiations are growing louder, but trust between opposing sides remains extremely fragile. History shows that moments like this can reshape entire regions. Leadership changes triggered by conflict have previously led either to prolonged instability or unexpected diplomatic breakthroughs. The direction events take often depends on decisions made in the immediate aftermath, whether leaders choose escalation, deterrence, or dialogue. For ordinary people across the region, the crisis brings uncertainty and fear. Air travel disruptions, economic instability, and security concerns affect daily life far beyond political circles. Families across multiple countries are watching developments closely, aware that decisions made by governments could influence peace or conflict for years to come. Globally, the situation serves as a reminder of how interconnected modern geopolitics has become. A single event in one country can influence markets, security policies, and political debates worldwide within hours. Governments, investors, and citizens alike are now closely monitoring developments, knowing that the next steps taken by regional leaders will shape the future trajectory of international relations. As the world waits for clarity, several possible paths lie ahead. Iran could stabilize under new leadership and seek controlled de-escalation. Retaliatory cycles could intensify, expanding conflict across borders. Or international diplomacy could reopen negotiations aimed at preventing long-term confrontation. Each outcome carries significant consequences, not only for the Middle East, but for global stability. What remains certain is that this moment represents more than a single military operation. It marks a geopolitical crossroads, one that could redefine alliances, alter power balances, and influence the global order for years, possibly decades to come. The coming weeks will reveal whether this event becomes the beginning of a wider conflict or the catalyst for a new political era. Until then, the world watches carefully, aware that history may already be unfolding in real time.